One. Hello out there, Facebook, YouTube. Good to see you all. Welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour. We'll do an intro of the program here in a minute. We're going to let our live studio audience into the Zoom room as well. One moment there as I get my bearings here. There we go. Participant, admit. Welcome. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour. Just getting settled in here. Good to have you here. Spotlight myself. Spotlight our guest for today. Yes, good to have you here. We'll give an intro of the program momentarily. Hello out there on Facebook and YouTube. Good to have you here. This is Piano Tech Radio Hour, and we are about to get started. Thanks for joining us today. Good to see some of our old friendly faces among the crowd, and your names as well among the participant list. Great to have you here. Justice, I'm going to make sure you're co-host so you can have those privileges. All right. Well, let's do an intro of the program and let's meet our guest for today. So this is Piano Tech Radio Hour. What do? We gather here every Saturday to meet with and learn from the most fascinating and knowledgeable folks in the piano world, including manufacturers, rebuilders, musicians, makers of other instruments, and of course, piano tech. Our mutual goal is to become better at our craft, to help each other, and to create an ever more musical world together. Piano Tech Radio Hour is brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, an online learning resource that brings you cutting-edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. Find out more at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. You can also subscribe to Radio Hour, just $16 a month. You get direct access to each week's private Zoom call, as well as the archival recordings of over 200 episodes in our member area. You can join using the link bit.ly/join PTR8. That's bit.ly/join PTR8. And then, of course, a few other things to make sure you're keeping track of. Keep track of the podcast. You can find that audio-only versions of this program at pianotechradio.com. And we put those out pretty regularly. Fun to listen to while you're driving around, working in the shop, lifting weights, doing dishes, whatever floats your boat on the podcast journey. And then, of course, check out our blog at the Substack, pianotechniciansmasterclass.substack.com. We give you really choice insights into the piano tech world, some information you'll be hard-pressed to find elsewhere. We'll put it into the blog. If you like it, then go ahead and subscribe to the masterclasses. You can subscribe monthly or do the one-off masterclasses and find out some cool stuff about, voicing, regulation, concert prep, history of the instrument, all kinds of exclusive information. And then make sure to check us out on the socials, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, stuff like that. You'll find some good information and keep up to date on what's going on. All right, let's introduce our guest for today. You can see him here, and we'll find out what he's all about. Yuri Liberzon is a world-renowned classical guitarist celebrated for his virtuosic performances and innovative transcriptions. Born in Novosibirsk, Russia, Yuri's journey to being recognized as an alien of extraordinary ability in the U.S. showcases his exceptional talent and dedication. With 3 acclaimed albums and an upcoming Naxos release featuring works by Konstantin Vassiliev, Yuri has graced prestigious stages and collaborated with top artists, ensembles, and orchestras. A student of guitar legends Yaron Hasson, Manuel Barrueco, and Benjamin Verdery, he blends a masterful technique with deeply emotive interpretations. Yuri's artistry continues to inspire, redefining the classical guitar repertoire and captivating audiences worldwide. Yuri, welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour.
Thank you very much. Nice to meet you all, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
What time is it over there? It's morning here in California.
Oh, in California. Well, I am in the Chicago area, so not too far off. We are at just after 1 p.m. here. And what, you're 11 a.m.?
Yeah.
Okay. What part of California?
Bay Area, near San Francisco.
Oh, okay, great. Great. Wonderful area. I love to visit. I was just there in the summertime for about 3 weeks, actually. I was staying in Palo Alto.
Oh, wow.
Or
Should
Mount, I think
know.
What's that?
You should have let me know.
Yeah, if only we had known. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we were still kind of working on the collaboration. But yeah, it was pretty fun. I actually know a piano technician out that way, who's actually a regular participant in the program. I think he's been missing the links or something. He's told me he's having some issues with his email, but his name is Larry Lobel. He's also taught for us, and he works with Sonoma State University, which is a bit north of San Francisco. Have you ever been up there?
To Sonoma, yeah, not to the university.
Okay. Yeah, they have a really great university there, and they have a beautiful concert venue, which is modeled after gosh, what, the name is escaping me, but it's modeled after another famous concert venue that has that kind of mid-century design aesthetic, and they built this entertainment complex there several years ago. It just kind of expanded and expanded and expanded and became this really ambitious project where they have amazing artists come through there all the time. So you should get yourself booked up there at Sonoma State University. It's called the Green Music Center.
Uh,
Yeah, I'm sure you'll enjoy the location. So yeah, anyways, I've been up there and kind of been all around the area doing some cool stuff. All right, let's get the conversation started. I would love to dive back into your history here and think about what it was like for you as a child. We've had some people who have Russian background, so we've got a little, a little taste of what it's like to grow up in a different country and have different musical, influences and roots, or it may just be kind of like your family's influence or whatnot. But it'd be lovely to hear your perspective. What was your childhood like musically?
um, well, first of all, it's really interesting to be joining a program that focuses on piano um, rather than, you know, uh, I guess being a guitarist, I feel we'll have to figure out how I fit into your idea of your podcast.
Hmm.
Um, but my journey was a little bit different, I would say, than, let's say, someone who would study piano in Russia. Of
Sure.
course, all those rumors, how strict it is, how the teachers are so strict. But I don't think you mentioned in your introduction that I moved to Israel when I was 10. So I moved to Israel when I was 10, and I came to the US when I was almost 18 for my college. Well, my journey in Russia began with my mom taking me to a music school, and they did this audition where, well, they just played some intervals. I guess they asked me which note is higher, which note is lower, and I guess I passed. And they said, well, because you passed, you got to play violin or piano. So we had a guitar at home, and my dad used to play a seven-string Russian guitar. So I burst into tears, and I was like, I want a guitar. But because I was a small child, I think I was 5 at the time. They said, well, you have to be 9 years old to begin guitar. But there was a teacher who made an exception, and he was able to find me a smaller guitar. So we started together. And in fact, when we started together, when I started studying with him, he would compose little pieces for me on the piano and write them down, and I would learn them on the guitar. So um, he was really amazing. I remember he got my interest going at an early childhood. And then 2 years later, I don't remember for what reason, but I had to switch to another teacher who was a student at the time at the conservatory. He was a guitarist. And then I studied for 2 more years with him, and he was very strict. He was quite strict. And then I moved to Israel after that and continued over there. So my experience of with music, I remember again, I'm from Siberia, and I remember walking to the music school every time with my mom in brutal cold weather, and I had to take guitar lessons. I had to take ear training. I had to take choir. That's all I remember at this point, but I remember it was a full curriculum. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, and these are all wonderful places for music. I mean, there's great musical things going on all over the globe, of course. But Russia has its own foundation. I don't hear much about Siberian musical, roots, but there's a lot of wonderful musicians and
You
a wonderful
know,
musical
yeah,
tradition out of Israel as well. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sure you've heard of a few people that came out of Novosibirsk. For example, Maxim Vengerov, the violinist.
Okay.
Uh, Also, this other violinist who I'm blanking on his name, but he studied with Maxim at the same time. He also has a big career. Um, uh, I mean, they have a conservatory there.
Hmm. Wonderful. Um, yeah, I was going to say Israel. I know of a lot of great musical things coming out of Israel, and of course, the United States has some wonderful things as well. Where did you settle again when you came to the States at 18?
So I went to the Peabody Conservatory straight.
Okay.
Yeah, I lived in Baltimore for 5 years. I did my undergrad and graduate performance diploma there. So yeah, I came from Israel. I came to Baltimore, lived in the dorms for 4 years, um, and then moved to New Haven, Connecticut.
Okay. New Haven. What do I know about New Haven? I feel like oh, New Haven. Yeah. Were you at the university there
I was
or?
I was at Yale for my master's. Um,
Okay.
yeah, I was going to make a comment about New Haven. There's not much to do there other than the university.
Pizza. They have some pizza.
You're right.
Apparently, they're supposed to be good pizza. I don't know if that's
You're right.
actually
There's a famous pizza shop there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Anyways, I made a road trip to New Haven from New York City one time. It's kind of funny because I moved from Chicago to New York. I brought a car, and and so I had this car, and I realized that all I was doing was shuffling it around from parking space to parking space. Wasn't really using it, and then you had to move it though because they had the street cleanings every other day or whatever. So it was just kind of like a death
Yeah.
trap for like tickets and expenses and hazards and stuff like that. So I was like, listen, I've got to use this car. If I'm going to have it in New York City, I've got to use it. So we said, well, let's take a road trip. That'll be a good use of the car. So we took a road trip to New Haven. And the funny thing was there was like super heavy traffic the day that we went. We were exhausted. We were out late the night before. So we were exhausted when we got there. And the best we could do is basically just kind of like stop and take a nap and get some pizza and then go home. And then there was traffic on the way back. And then we were like, we could have taken the train from New York to New Haven and probably would have even been more fun. And that was kind of like one of the turning points of like, I do not need a car in New York City. But it
Yeah.
was it was nice to visit New Haven for a day. I wish I had longer.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you mentioned New York. I lived in New York for 2 years too,
You did
with a car.
with a car.
Yeah.
Congratulations. What area did you
I
station in?
lived in Washington Heights,
Okay.
so that's very close to the Washington Bridge, New Jersey.
Hmm. Okay. So parking's like, it's not terrible up there because it's
It's
not as
terrible,
congested.
but it's sometimes possible, I would say.
Sometimes possible. Yeah. I studied at the city college, which is kind of up that way, up in the Harlem area.
Yeah.
So wonderful. Um, but let's play a little bit of your music. So I have a few links here that you shared. Let me see if I can share the audio here so we can get to that with the computer audio, make sure that's going on. And I have a couple of things. You've shared a Piazzolla, a Bach, and a Vassiliev. What do you think would be a good first exposure to your music here?
Well, the Piazzolla is my latest album that just came out this past September.
Okay.
Maybe something from that.
Yeah. Let me make sure I'm getting this correct. So this would be Piazzolla, and then which piece? should I pick? We've got the Tango Suites and Oblivion and
Yeah.
that.
Let me see what would be good. So I would say majority of the tracks are solo recordings, and then the
Okay.
first three tracks are with another guitarist.
Okay.
Um, Maybe we could do Cinco Piezas number 2, Romantica, I think it's called.
Okay. Perfect. Track number 7, Cinco Piezas number 2. Let's check it out. Can you hear it?
Yep.
I'll pause it there. Beautiful. All of that track. Love the intervals and the nice juicy chords. Very intervallic in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is the only piece that Piazzolla wrote for guitar, the Cinco Piezas, 5 pieces.
Wow.
Everything else are arrangements. The only other thing he wrote for guitar is for two guitars, the first three tracks, the Tango Suite.
Okay. Yeah. So should we listen to one of those just for fun?
Yeah, sure. Maybe number 1.
Number 1. Let's check it out. Wow. Wow, what a groove on that. Love it.
Thank you.
Um, is that so with the introduction there and you had the kind of rhythmic playing, I'm assuming that's on the body of the guitar.
Percussive part, yeah.
Is that written out
Yes.
on a score? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
And how do you know exactly what is it just the rhythms or does it tell you like where to play it on the guitar or something?
So the way I think it was written, I believe, well, first of all, he wrote it for the Assad duo. They're this Brazilian guitar duo that it was written for them.
Mhm.
And in the score, it does indicate where on the body you should be hitting the guitar.
Okay.
But the idea, I think, is that you want different pitches of the percussion sound, so it's not all the same. Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, like a bass, kind of like a bass
yeah,
and treble almost.
high and
Yeah.
low.
Hmm. Beautiful. Um, yeah, we have had several guitarists on the program, by the way. We actually just had another guitarist last week, um, and he plays the 7-string guitar. Have you played the 7-string much, or is this what you use?
Not seriously, no.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it was fascinating to hear about that. I also had a gentleman named Jonathan Taylor, who also is pretty well known, and he does a lot of arranging. Apparently, one of the things he said is that there's um, there's not a lot. it's complicated to arrange for the guitar. Basically, put it
Yeah,
that way. We talked a lot about the details of that and how you go about taking on that challenge. It was interesting to hear about.
yeah.
Um, so when you were a youngster and you like really had this desire to play the guitar, what were you imagining? Were you imagining classical guitar? Were you imagining like a rock and roll guitar? Like what were you what was your why was it such a how did you have such an attachment to it at that young age?
Um, well, when I just started studying guitar, I remember in the summers when I would be on a summer break, I would just sit down with whatever scores I had, and I would just sight read. And there were many things I didn't understand in the music, like how do you play this? Where do you play it? I didn't quite know the fingerboard, but there were some parts that I could kind of play, and that was really enjoyable. So from early on, I started from reading scores. I used to listen to a lot of music, not classical, most of the time. I discovered the Beatles, um, and I would play records and tapes, and that was just something I would do every day.
Hmm.
I would study the records, you know, a lot, and but yeah, I never really played much of other styles. I mean, I do play other music, like for example, like I played Keith Jarrett's piece on the guitar. I've played the Beatles and arrangements, of course,
Hmm.
transcriptions, like the
Hmm.
Bach violin sonatas. I have a whole album of Bach. That's not, of course, for guitar because he never wrote for the guitar.
Hmm. Is that one of the tracks that you shared as well?
Yeah, the Bach album has.
Let me see where that came up. Let me grab that. I think I tried that link, but it didn't open it. Let me double check that one. By the way, we had somebody, David Boyce. I don't know if you saw this in the chat, which is kind of crazy. David says he has a friend from Nizhnevartov, Siberia, staying with him right now in his room, watching the program. So he's a fellow Siberian tuning in today. Kind of fun.
I actually am not familiar where that city is. It's something I have to look it up.
Certainly looks fun to spell.
Yeah.
All right, let me see about this Bach one. Okay, for some reason the Bach one brings the Bach link that you shared brings up the Piazzolla
Oh,
album for me. I don't know
let
why that
me.
happened.
I can quickly.
Oh, you know what? You shared the same
Yeah, my apologies.
link. Yeah. I'm
Uh,
wondering if I just write Bach in the link, it'll come up.
yeah, exactly. Slash Bach. That
Oh,
should
forward
work.
slash Bach. Yeah, let me try that.
Oh, no, no, no. Three sonatas. That's what it should be. Slash three sonatas.
One word, three sonatas.
Yeah, all together. Yep, that comes up.
Three sonatas. Share the link with me because it's not quite coming up
One
with me yet.
second. Okay, here's the link.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Password should be Bach.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Which track do you recommend?
Let's see. Let's do number one, or actually number two, the fugue.
Number two? Okay. Sonata in G minor, BWV 1001. Number two, Fuga Allegro. Yep, check it out. trying to get it to pause, but I couldn't figure out how.
I gotta be
That's
working something wrong with the track.
yeah. I couldn't figure out. It was like rewinding and fast forwarding it. Um, so where did the transcriptions come from for that? Were you saying that it was you, or is there a third party
Um,
that's doing this, or
so it was mostly my former teacher, Manuel Barrueco, who did the transcription.
okay?
I mean, I made a few changes, but mostly him. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, clearly it's got to be a challenge playing something that's written for the piano, playing it on the guitar.
For violin,
Um,
for the violin.
oh, it's written for the violin. Okay. And is it written for one violin
Yeah,
or?
yeah.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Unaccompanied violin.
Okay. So not as complicated probably as if it was written for the piano because it's written for having to finger, these odd
Well,
things. Yeah.
no, it's a very difficult piece for violinists because
Okay.
they have to play double notes and yeah, the intonation is the tricky part. Not so much for guitar, but we have other issues. Like we have to deal with legato playing and with not having too many squeaks because
Hmm.
we have a stretch for the wounded bass strings. They when you release a finger, it squeaks a lot, and you can hear on this recording I do a lot of that.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. It's a delicate balance. Yeah. You've got to figure out where you can let it in and say, okay, well, that's just how it happens and make it sound good versus trying to avoid it altogether. Um, have you played a lot of Bach uh, throughout your career?
Yes,
Or is
yes. So the great thing about the guitar is that you can play Bach that music by Bach that he wrote for the lute suites,
oh, he
cello
did. Okay.
cello suites, six cello suites, and then you can do the violin sonatas and partitas, and then you can also do piano works. Um, but those are thicker, so often they're played on two guitars.
Yeah, that makes sense. Talk about your relationship to classical music. How have you found that, exploration, how much of you find yourself a student of the history of music because of being a classical musician? How do you feel about the current state of what you might call concert music or classical music? How things are evolving and changing. What are your thoughts there?
That's a big question. Um, you know, um, a distinction has to be made between classical music and classical guitar. So, the way I think of classical guitar is not necessarily just classical music. I think it's more of the instrument that you play. So, classical guitar is the type of instrument that I play that has nylon strings, that has a certain body shape, produces a certain tone. To differentiate it from a steel string guitar or an electric guitar, even though they all have six strings and they all have the same frets and everything, but they produce different sound. And you play classical guitar with nails, so you have much wider tonal palette. Anyway, the one I say, I think I am more of a classical guitarist rather than a classical musician.
Hmm.
Um, Classical music is big, part of I would say, majority of what I play is classical music. But I also like if you consider Astor Piazzolla, I don't think he's really a classical musician. He's more of a this is its own style, tango nuevo, new tango. Or if you consider, when I played Keith Jarrett, that's not classical at all. So those um, I like to blend the genres a little bit
Hmm.
and to be a little more fluid between those genres. And that's how I typically structure my concert programs. I like to vary things. Um, yeah, I think it's more interesting that way for me.
Do you have any thoughts on how you might see the audiences for these things, right? Because I totally get what you're saying. Like classical guitar is could be lumped in with classical music, but it is its own genre, and it's got its own, I guess, like history and sort of culture, and solo is a big part of that. Um, do you find it that there's a similar or different audience there? When you're playing your concert, who's listening to the classical guitar?
So when I think of a program, when I decide on a program, I don't think of my audience as being classical guitarists. First of all, there's not that many people who know what a classical guitar is. Actually, that's still a surprise to me. I often play and people say, I had no idea you could play like that on the guitar. Um, so that's another reason, motivation for me to play varied music, to introduce them to show them what the guitar can do. Yeah. Um, yeah, I'm sorry. Do
The
you have
question
another?
was, so yeah, no, it just was the curiosity around the audience and kind of if there was an overlap with the like sort of the classical, traditional classical, orchestral music or things like that. Are you doing much? Are you teaching actively out there in
I
the
am,
Bay Area at like a
yeah.
university or just independent lessons or?
So I am also teaching now at the university. I'm teaching at the Stanislaus State University.
Mm-hmm.
It's up in Turlock. It's near Modesto. So and I also have a full teaching studio, private studio in Los Altos, kind of Palo Alto area.
Yes, yes, nice area.
So yeah, I'm teaching full time, and I'm also teaching at the university.
Is that what brought you to the Bay Area? How did you find yourself there?
No, well, the reason why I came to the Bay Area, I graduated from Yale, then I moved to New York. Um, I mentioned how I had a car in New York, and I think I realized that New York is not necessarily long term for me, just because of the I didn't have good work there, and I struggled, I think, with the weather, with the parking. And at the time, I had a girlfriend who was originally from the Bay Area, so we moved back here uh, to the to the Bay Area. That's what brought me to the Bay Area, and we're no longer together. But I decided to stick around, and little by little, I built a full schedule for teaching private students, and I really love teaching my private students here. The reason is, I mean, not just because I love teaching, but also my students are really great. They are in the tech world mostly.
Hmm.
They're all professionals who actually, some of them even have degrees in music, but they never really pursued it. And I think they're super motivated and um, intelligent people. So I enjoy it as well.
Wonderful. And so they might be so they're working like a job doing computer
Yeah,
programming or maybe managing some team or something like that.
yeah,
They're working
yeah,
for yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And are you? I don't think we mentioned it specifically. You said you do some teaching out of Los Altos. Are you specifically living in the city of San Francisco or kind of the surrounds? Where do you
So
find yourself?
I live on Peninsula. So Peninsula it goes basically from San Francisco to San Jose.
Okay.
This whole stretch along the bay,
Okay.
along Highway 101.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of little towns here. So I live in Burlingame.
Okay. Great. Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking I've actually about moving out that direction. So it's interesting. I've just kind of looked at the different areas, and I have a friend who was at Stanford, who is at Stanford doing some things, and they just bought a condo in San Francisco. Uh, However, I have, you know, I've I'm sure you've heard and seen, like the city of San Francisco has the mixed reviews currently. you know.
Yes, yes, definitely so. And I moved here in 2009 to the Bay Area,
hmm
and it changed drastically. I haven't been to San Francisco in a long time. I don't have
hmm
much of a reason to go there.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
that's kind of like how as I became familiar with the area and was specifically interested because I did an artist residency out there in um in the Santa Cruz Mountains. It's called Jurassic. If you are not familiar with it, you should check it out. But I was like, oh, this is a great area. But yes, the more I looked into it, the more like San Francisco didn't necessarily seem appealing. The city of, but the surrounding areas did, and I like the nature out there and the ocean
yeah.
and there's cultural things and
And if
technology
you're in
and business
Chicago, you
things.
would appreciate the warm weather throughout the
Yes,
year.
yes, it's nice. Definitely.
I remember coming to Chicago and it was so windy.
Yeah, it is indeed cold and windy today. Um, let's check out another track. I think we have something. Let's see. Off
From
of
the Vassiliev album.
yeah, yeah. What would be a good one from that one?
Let me take a look.
I've seen track names that are
Yeah.
jumping out at me, which I'm intrigued by. For example, the Jazz Story,
Yes.
Sinesta, and Cinderella. So, I don't know. Those all just sounded.
So that's interesting. The Sinesta actually is um is written after uh, the piano famous composer. I'm blanking on his name. Gosh, the big name. Uh,
A pianist and composer.
yeah, classical. I'll tell you in 1 second. Uh, oh my gosh. Yes, Scriabin.
Scriabin. Okay, cool.
Maybe that. It's a longer
Yeah,
piece. Let's hear it.
let's hear a
Clip.
little bit of that. Yeah, for sure. Here we go, Sinesta. Nice. Caught it right there at that note. um, beautiful. That's a beautiful piece. For some reason, as I listen to that one, I'm thinking about the concept of, intonation and, you know, your ability as a stringed instrument player to put some nuance into the way the chords and notes come through. You can play it a tiny bit sharp or flat or whatnot, and that sort of overlaps with our foundations here is like piano tuners and things like that.
Yeah.
Um,
I actually there's something I wanted to maybe bring up that may be interesting to you.
yes.
I have been obsessed with getting being able to play more in tune than most guitarists. And that has to do a lot with the instrument itself, because as we know, there is no perfect way of setting up an instrument that will play in tune in every key,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's a big problem for us, for guitarists. Like if we play something in A major and then in A minor, the third is not going to be in tune always. So there have been attempts to find a compromise, to uh, split the difference, so to speak. Um, and um, anyway, I have been on this mission to find the best possible way to set up my instrument. And I've visited, I don't know, maybe 10 different luthiers. Excuse me. And some people have different systems. There's something called compensation of the open string. So the length of the open string uh, has to be compensated slightly to the left or to the right, depending on the string diameter and other uh, other parameters. Not to even mention that the guitar moves because the wood expands and contracts depending on the temperature and weather. Um, anyway, it was just something very interesting and fascinating to me. And my ear has become very, very sharp. It's sensitive to intonation because I actually I edited my own recordings. I edited the Piazzolla album, which was released on Naxos. And I have this relationship with the engineer who recorded me, and he taught me how he edits, and I was practicing on my own album. So anyway, I just became very tuned into the intonation. It's a blessing and a curse. Then I really it grabs my attention when I probably should be focusing on other things, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, indeed. Well, when you're tuning pianos all day, you become very, uh, zoned in on the sound of the pitch, right? And of course, there are those ways in which, any given note or interval on the piano, it could be thought of as out of tune, because there's overtones, and they start to bother you, and you start to really dive in, and yes, that can be definitely an annoying feature there. But it's I have my own, which I think I can understand, just obsession with tuning. If I play the guitar myself, right, I don't play it, extensively. But when I do, I love tuning the guitar, and I love thinking about, oh, how do I get the notes to sound the way that I want them to together, and bringing in my knowledge about tuning and things like that. Yeah.
Is that the reason why on certain strings there are three strings to kind of make them slightly out of tune so that they will sound in more or less in tune in every key?
The foundational reason for three strings is volume. So basically, what happens is, for the low strings, you need fatter strings in order to have them be a shorter length and have the lower pitch that you want. And then as you move up the piano, you want sort of thinner strings. However, when you have thinner strings, they move less. I'm probably BSing here a little bit, but as they move less air, right? So they don't create as intense of a sound. So then by having three strings vibrate at the same time, it basically triples the volume that you would get. So ideally, they're not out of tune at all.
Mm.
They're in tune, or some people argue that there's, in tune means there's a way to approach tuning three strings together that will give them more of the character that you want. But either way, it's more about the volume than any other character of the tone. Yeah, that's what that is.
And pianos are still, of course, tuned by a human being. And is the process always the same, or is it every person has slight variation?
I would say every person has and can have any slight variation that they'd like to tune a piano. We do use devices nowadays, electronic tuning devices. They've been around, throughout the last century, beginning with like boxes that were solely, created for tuning purposes, and then evolving into, things that you can have on your phone these days. So nowadays, most technicians are going to use an electronic tuning device, which manifests as an application on their phone. But even then, the process of tuning, there's all these nuances of just the mechanics of getting the tuning pins to stay where you want them to stay, and moving them quickly enough to get through the tuning, understanding the changes in tension on the instruments that occur as you tune the piano, and how tuning one note actually could affect another note.
Right.
So there's all of that. And yes, different piano technicians have different approaches to the sequencing of that and the execution of the tuning, and then also slight variations as to the tuning itself. How sharp are you going to make that note, in the context of the other notes?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
super interesting to me. And I also found that those apps, they actually all have different algorithms, how they calculate the pitch. So I don't know. I found one that is no longer supported that I really like, but everything else seems to be either not responsive enough, or it's really hard to tell accurately within cents where you are.
Mm. And are you talking about apps for tuning the guitar or for the piano or
Yeah, for the
both?
guitar. For the
For the
guitar.
guitar. Yeah, even for the guitar, you're saying like
Yeah,
there's nuances as to what makes a good app.
yeah, very
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Fascinating. Um, well, we found some overlap here in our domain. Do you do much, in the domain of piano? Do you have friends that you collaborate with, or
I've
do you?
certainly played with pianists. I have many friends who are pianists, but I had to take a basic piano when I was in college. Another interesting thing I want to bring up is I always struggle playing piano. And I think the reason is because I started guitar at a very young age. And on the guitar, there is slight out of sync between the hands. So, the left hand is slightly more ahead of the right hand. And on the piano, it's not that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I always found it's hard for me to play at the same time, both hands.
Oh, really?
My brain is confused. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. That's an interesting concept. Yeah, because there's some sequencing that has to go on. You have to kind of get there
Yeah.
with the left hand first before you play the right hand, or else it's gonna have a little flub on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you find your left hand wants to be ahead of your right hand, I suppose, in some ways.
Yeah. I think that's the reason. It certainly never felt right to play at the same time, just because I'm not used to it.
Well, I'm learning the cello because my son is taking cello lessons, so that's been fun. And then I did just get him an electric guitar for Christmas. And he's 7 years old. So I mean, I've played guitar here and there throughout the years, but I don't know if you've heard, it's a three-string electric guitar. There's a company called Loog, Loog. If you need to recommend something to a youngster to pick up guitar, they have the hollow body guitars, and they have six-string guitars as well, but it's a three-string guitar so that a youngster can sort of get used to playing the top three notes of the guitar and get basic chords together without being overwhelmed.
Like a version of a ukulele, but with three strings.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. I would say, yeah, probably kind of like that. But yeah, I've been playing with it. It's fun. Um, anything anything you want to cover before we wrap for today? Words of wisdom, where to send people, to follow about what you're doing, recommendations, whatnot.
Well, I can share my website, which is very easy to remember. It's Yuri, which is my name, and guitar.com
Oh, nice.
altogether. Yeah. Um,
Everything else evolves from there.
yeah, I have a calendar, upcoming concerts, uh, links for recordings, uh, YouTube, everything is there.
Wonderful. Appreciate it. Got a little comment here that came in from Bill Clayton. Bill Clayton said, pianos have inharmonicity, while guitars have almost no inharmonicity. So tuning algorithms are not interchangeable.
Oh, that's interesting.
Mhm. Do you know what inharmonicity is?
No, first time I see that word, but I
It's
think
it's a very exclusive to piano tuning, probably, yeah. So each string on the piano, especially as you strike it, as opposed to plucking it or bowing it, has a different effect. Um, there's that overtone series that you have on all instruments. You have it on your guitar too. You can hear like the harmonic basically among the bass tone when you play it. Um, and what ends up happening on the piano is the overtone series, which we call the partial series. Um, each pitch of that, you've got the octave, you've got the octave in a fifth, you've got the double octave, you've got the double octave in a third, double octave in a fifth. Each of those different pitches, you would expect them to be mathematically uh, simple relationship. So, for example, the octave above
two to
440
one,
should be 880.
like two to
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, like 2 to 1 or 3 to 2 or 5 to 4 or whatever it is, simple integer ratios. But what ends up happening is because of the physics of the string and the fact that it's struck, um, the values are off a little bit. So, for example, instead of 440 and then the octave above is 880, maybe it's like 880 plus a little bit. You know,
Yeah.
yeah.
But we have a similar issue and a different issue. When you press down the string,
Hmm.
also shortening the string by pressing it down.
Right.
You're made usually the higher up the neck you go, more of that effect is even more because the string are higher off the fingerboard.
Hmm.
So that also has to be taken into account with the compensations. Yeah.
Yeah. Every instrument is just a a series of compromises. We had a piano design specialist on the program a few times, and that's one thing that he mentioned. It's like you have the ideal that you want to come out with from an instrument. You have maybe a specific tone, character, whatever, playability, things like that. Ultimately, there's all these places where nothing's going to be perfect, but you have to find the best place to compromise on everyone, where
Yeah.
nothing's absolutely perfect, but nothing's absolutely out far enough that it's going to be distracting.
Yeah. It's a really difficult task.
It is, yeah, instrument design for sure. Okay, well, it was wonderful to have you today. Really appreciate you joining us. Great to meet you, and hope we stay connected. I'll do a bit of an outro on the program, and we'll say goodbye for the day. We have reached the end of another musical journey here at Piano Tech Radio Hour. Thanks to Yuri for joining us, and of course our audience that's often with us each week. As always, we're brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, cutting edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. For those of you that have joined us today by just signing up for this session individual, you should make your life more convenient. Subscribe to Piano Tech Radio Hour, $16 a month. You get the recording of today's session in a member area, automatic registration for each week's new session. Sign up at bit.ly/join PTRH, bit.ly/join PTRH. Don't forget about the podcast, the blog on Substack, all of our socials, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. We also have a masterclass coming up with Benjamin Rock on key repairs. So keep your ear to the ground for that. We'll send out more information. Make sure you sign up for that. All right, everyone. Happy New Year to you. This is our inaugural session of 2025. Great to have you all back again. And